When NBA superstar Stephen Curry stood at the McDonald's counter and realized he'd forgotten his wallet, a humble, elderly homeless man stepped forward to offer his last bit of money to pay for the meal. Little did the kind-hearted stranger know that the man he was helping was not only one of basketball's greatest players, but also a down-to-earth celebrity who would ensure this act of kindness did not go unnoticed. Downtown Oakland sweltered in the afternoon sun as Stephen Curry guided his white Tesla Model X through the Saturday afternoon traffic. His wife, Aisha, sat beside him, while their eldest daughter, Riley Elizabeth Curry, occupied the back seat. As they drove toward the local community sports center in Oakland, where the Warriors host casual games for fans and family, conversation flowed naturally between them. Steph glanced at Riley through the rearview mirror, catching Riley's eye as he explained the day's plans. "You excited for the game today, Riley?" he asked. Riley nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, will I get to play too, Dad?" Steph chuckled. "Well, it's more of a casual game for the fans and family to watch, but maybe we can shoot some hoops together afterward." Aisha turned in her seat to face Riley. "Your dad's right, sweetie. These community games are a bit different from the regular ones. It's more relaxed, more about having fun and connecting with people. It's a chance for everyone to have fun and spend time together." Riley nodded, her eyes bright with interest. "Will there be lots of kids there too, Dad?" Steph chuckled. "Absolutely, it's all about bringing families together. Speaking of which, how do you think Ryan and Cannon are doing with Aunt Zora?" Aisha turned in her seat, addressing Riley directly. "I'm sure they're having a great time. You know how much Ryan loves playing big sister to Cannon." "But why couldn't they come with us?" Riley asked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Aisha explained gently, "Well, sweetheart, Cannon's still a toddler. The long hours at a basketball game might be a bit overwhelming for him, but he'll be fine with Ryan keeping him company at home." Steph nodded in agreement. "That's right, and Aunt Zora will take good care of them. We'll have plenty of family outings when Cannon's a bit older." As they continued their drive, the conversation drifted to various topics: Riley's upcoming school year, Aisha's latest cooking experiments, and Steph's training regimen. The family dynamic was evident in their easy banter and shared laughter. Suddenly, Riley's voice piped up from the back seat. "Dad, I'm hungry. Can we get something to eat before the game?" Steph considered the request, checking the time on the dashboard display. They were making good time, and a quick snack wouldn't hurt. "All right, but let's keep it light. We don't want you feeling sluggish during the game." "Okay," Riley agreed eagerly. As if on cue, a McDonald's sign appeared ahead. Steph smoothly navigated the Tesla into the drive-thru lane, finding himself behind several other vehicles. The line moved slower than expected, with each car taking longer than usual at the ordering window. Steph drummed his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, checking the time occasionally on his dashboard display. The afternoon heat began to build in the car despite the advanced cooling system. Steph drummed his fingers lightly on the steering wheel. "Looks like we might be here for a while," Aisha observed, noticing Steph's slight impatience. "Yeah, I hope this doesn't make us late for the game," Steph replied, his brow furrowing slightly. As they waited, the family fell into comfortable conversation, discussing their plans for the upcoming week and reminiscing about past family outings. The slow-moving line, while frustrating, provided an unexpected moment of quiet family time in their otherwise busy lives. As they waited in the seemingly endless drive-thru line, movement caught Steph's eye. An elderly homeless man was moving between the cars, asking for donations. His weathered face and tattered clothing told a story of hardship, though he maintained a dignified demeanor as he approached each vehicle. His eyes were downcast, a mixture of hope and resignation in his gaze. Riley, ever observant, leaned forward in her seat. "Dad, Mom, look," she said, her voice filled with concern. "That old man looks like he really needs help. Can we do something?" Steph and Aisha exchanged glances, both touched by their daughter's compassion. Aisha rummaged through her purse, her expression falling as she realized she had no small change available. "I don't have any cash on me," she said apologetically. Steph reached for his wallet, a frown crossing his face as he opened it. "I only brought $20 with me to the game," he said, surprised at the unusually small amount for the NBA star. It made sense, though. He was going to a casual community game, and Aisha was usually the one who kept the money in these situations. As the elderly man approached their car, Steph found himself facing a quick internal debate. He knew he needed most of the money for Riley's meal, but he felt compelled to help. The decision weighed on him as he considered the balance between helping others and providing for his daughter. Riley, sensing her father's hesitation, spoke up. "It's okay, Dad. We can't eat much before the game anyway. We should give it to the man." Steph felt a surge of pride at his daughter's selflessness. After a moment's consideration, he rolled down his window and extended a $10 bill to the elderly man who had now reached their car. The beggar's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and gratitude crossing his weathered features. "Bless you, child," he said, his voice carrying genuine appreciation. It was clear he didn't recognize the famous athlete helping him. As quickly as he had appeared, the old man vanished around the corner, disappearing from view in the Tesla's rearview mirror. The family sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, the brief encounter leaving a lasting impression. "That was a kind thing you did, Dad," Riley said softly from the back seat. Steph smiled, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Sometimes, Riley, a small act of kindness can make a big difference in someone's day. We're fortunate, and it's important to help others when we can." Aisha nodded in agreement, reaching over to squeeze Steph's hand. The moment of generosity had shifted the mood in the car, reminding them all of the importance of compassion and giving. "Do you think he'll be okay, Dad?" Riley, still looking backward, trying to find a glimpse of the man. Steph turned to look at his daughter, her young face etched with concern. "I hope so, sweetheart. We've done what we could for now." The minutes ticked by as the Curry family remained stationary in the drive-thru line. The initial patience they had mustered was beginning to wear thin. Steph's eyes darted more frequently to the dashboard clock, the digital numbers a constant reminder of their approaching game time. He exchanged glances with Aisha, who understood his mounting concern about being late to the community event. She placed a reassuring hand on his arm, but even her touch couldn't fully ease the tension building in his shoulders. "This is taking way longer than it should," Steph muttered, his usual calm demeanor showing signs of strain. Riley's voice chimed in from the back seat. "Are we going to miss the game, Dad?" Steph turned to offer his daughter a reassuring smile. "No, sweetie, we won't miss it. We might be a little late, but that's okay. Sometimes things don't go as planned." Unable to remain passive any longer, Steph made a decision. He turned to Aisha and Riley. "I'm going to see what's causing the hold-up. I'll be right back." With that, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the Tesla. His athletic frame unfolded from the driver's seat as he walked toward the speakerphone ordering system. The car ahead still blocked direct access to the speaker, forcing him to approach on foot. As Steph neared the ordering system, movement caught his eye. A McDonald's employee, looking slightly frazzled, was hurrying towards him. The worker, a young man probably in his early 20s, was slightly out of breath as he intercepted Steph. "I'm sorry, sir," the employee began, his words tumbling out in a rush. "We need to close the drive-thru immediately. There's a broken-down vehicle at the front of the line." Steph's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A broken-down car? How long has this been going on?" The employee shifted uncomfortably. "It just happened, but we can't move the car. We're asking everyone to back out so we can clear the lane." His voice carrying a note of apology. "We're really sorry for the inconvenience, sir. If you'd like, you can park and come inside to order." Steph nodded, understanding the situation but feeling frustrated at the wasted time. He turned back to his car, and as he slid back into the driver's seat, Aisha and Riley looked at him expectantly. "What's going on, honey?" Aisha asked. Steph sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's a broken-down car at the front of the line. They're closing the drive-thru and asking everyone to back out." Steph glanced at the time again. Riley, showing maturity beyond her years, suggested, "Maybe we should forget about the food so we're not late for the game." Steph considered his daughter's words, but after a moment he shook his head. "We've already invested time waiting here. Let's park and go inside instead. It should be quick." With that decision made, Steph carefully maneuvered the Tesla out of the drive-thru line, reversing with precision to allow space for the cars ahead of them to exit as well. He then guided the car into a parking spot, the sleek vehicle coming to a stop under the afternoon sun. As they prepared to enter the restaurant, Riley announced she wanted to come inside with Steph. Aisha, engaged in a video call with Zora about Ryan and Cannon's activities, opted to stay in the car. "I'll wait here," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'll just be a few minutes," Steph assured Aisha, as he and Riley headed towards the entrance. The fluorescent lighting inside the McDonald's created a stark contrast to the natural afternoon sun outside. As their eyes adjusted, Steph and Riley found themselves witnessing a tense scene unfolding near the side door. An employee, his face set in a harsh frown, was aggressively attempting to remove several homeless individuals. Some had been searching through trash bins, while others were simply sitting without purchases. The confrontation was drawing attention from other customers, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere. Riley tugged at her father's sleeve, her young voice filled with confusion and concern. "Dad, why is that man being so mean to those people?" Steph knelt down to Riley's level, recognizing this as a teaching moment. "Well, sweetheart, businesses have policies about who can be in their stores, but you're right. The way that employee is handling it seems unnecessarily harsh." Riley's brow furrowed as she processed this information. But couldn't they just be nicer about it? He continued, choosing his words carefully. "It's a complex situation, Riley. The store has rules, but there's always a way to treat people with kindness and respect, no matter the situation." As they approached the counter, Riley's eyes widened in recognition. "Dad, look, it's the man from earlier." Sure enough, Steph followed her gaze to see the homeless man they had helped in the drive-thru was just completing his order. Steph felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, seeing the man using the money for food instead of cigarette or alcohol. "See, Riley," Steph said softly, "this is why it's important to help others when we can. We don't always know their stories or what they're going through." Riley nodded, her young face serious as she absorbed her father's words. As they waited their turn to order, Steph continued the lesson. "It's important to be wise about how we help others," he explained, "but it's equally important not to judge too harshly. Sometimes being overly critical can stop us from helping at all." Riley considered this, her brow furrowed in thought. "So we should try to help, even if we're not sure how it will turn out." Steph smiled, proud of his daughter's insight. "Exactly. It's about the intention to do good, even in small ways, but also keeping wisdom at the same time. You'll learn it as you grow." He smiled at her and brushed her hair. Riley nodded, her eyes still on the elderly man. "Can we say hi to him?" Steph considered for a moment. "Let's order our food first, then we can see if he'd like some company, okay?" Steph and Riley approached the counter, ready to place their order. The cashier, a young woman with a friendly smile, greeted them warmly. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Steph. Riley, excited to order for herself, spoke up first. "Can I have chicken nuggets and chips, please?" Steph nodded approvingly. "And I'll have a single cheeseburger and iced tea." The cashier quickly input their order, then announced the total. It was at this moment that Steph reached for his wallet, only to find his pockets empty. The realization of his forgotten wallet hit him like a missed three-pointer. "Oh no," he muttered, patting his pockets frantically. "I must have left my wallet in the car." By now, several customers had begun recognizing him as the famous Warriors player. Whispers emerged from the growing crowd, adding to Steph's discomfort. Riley, noticing her father's embarrassment, quickly volunteered, "I can go get your wallet from the car, Dad." "It's okay, sweetie," Steph said, forcing a smile. "I'll just run out to the car and grab it. You wait here, all right?" Steph took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. He was acutely aware of the eyes on him, several customers having recognized the famous Warriors player. Whispers began to emerge from the growing crowd. The old man, still not recognizing Steph's celebrity status, extended several worn dollar bills, more than the $10 Steph had given him earlier. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he offered the money. "Please," the man said, his voice rough but kind, "I couldn't help but overhear. Let me help. You were kind to me earlier, and I'd like to return the favor." "Sir, that's very kind of you," Steph began, his voice thick with emotion. "But we couldn't possibly—" The old man interrupted gently. "Please let me do this. You helped me when I needed it. Allow me to return the favor." Understanding the dignity in allowing others to give, Steph accepted the man's offer with a humble gesture. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Your kindness means a lot. We'll pay you back, I promise." As the cashier processed the payment, Steph handled the exchange with careful respect. He was acutely aware of how this moment might impact both the old man's sense of worth and Riley's understanding of human kindness. This moment, he realized, was teaching Riley and reminding him about the circular nature of kindness and the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their circumstances. The beep of the cash register marked this unusual transaction, a poignant reminder that generosity can come from unexpected sources. After accepting their receipt, Steph helped to guide the elderly man to step aside from the order counter. They walked to the pickup station, and Steph explained he needed to quickly retrieve his wallet from the car to repay the loan. "Sir, you just did a very kind thing for us, and I need to run out to the car quickly to get my wallet so I can pay you back. Please continue your meal at the table." Steph said to the old man, "Riley, would you mind waiting here with our new friend while I do that?" Riley nodded, happy to keep the kind old man company. Steph hurried toward the exit, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows as he moved. Outside, the afternoon sun was at its highest peak in the sky. Steph approached his Tesla, where Aisha remained absorbed in her video call with Zora, unaware of the unfolding situation inside. The parking lot had grown busier with more cars pulling in. Steph quickly grabbed his wallet from the compartment, calling out to Aisha, "Everything's fine, just forgot my wallet, be right back." As he re-entered McDonald's, Steph was met with an unsettling sight. The pickup station was empty, and so was the man's table, with no sign of Riley or the elderly man. Scanning the restaurant, his athlete's instincts kicked in as he picked up sounds of commotion from the side door. Following the noise, Steph discovered a scene that sent anger coursing through him. The restaurant manager, a stocky man in his 40s with a permanently furrowed brow, was physically removing the old man despite his legitimate purchase. Riley was attempting to intervene, her young voice rising above the commotion. "Stop it," Riley cried out. "He just paid for our meal. He's allowed to be here." The manager dismissed her protests completely, his rough handling of the elderly man showing no concern for age or dignity. His actions reflected deep-seated prejudice rather than any legitimate policy enforcement. Steph rushed forward, his voice carrying the calm authority of a team leader. "What's going on here? This man is our guest. He has every right to be in the restaurant." "Listen here," the manager growled, jabbing a finger in Steph's direction. "I don't care who you think you are. In this restaurant I make the rules, and I say that homeless trash doesn't belong here." His face reddening as he faced Steph. "This isn't a shelter," he spat. "We have standards." Steph's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice level. "Standards that include mistreating paying customers? I'm telling you that this man is a paying customer who deserves to be treated with respect. There's no reason for this behavior." The manager's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Respect? For someone who probably hasn't showered in weeks, get real." The manager's dismissive attitude creating a tense standoff near the side door. His words cut sharp through the air as he declared, "Homeless attire isn't welcome in my establishment. If you like him so much, then stay and eat outside with him." Riley, showing remarkable presence of mind, held up their order receipt. "Look, this proves he paid for our food. You can't kick him out. He was nice to us." The manager studied the receipt with obvious reluctance, then laughed it off. "Do you expect me to believe that he's paying for this?" The manager's gaze shifted to Riley, his expression softening only slightly. "Listen, kid, I don't care who pays. You two can eat inside, but this old beggar stays outside because his attire looks like trash." Steph placed a protective hand on Riley's shoulder, his voice low and controlled. "Is this really the lesson you want to teach? That it's okay to judge and mistreat people based on appearances?" For a moment, something like doubt flickered across the manager's face, but it was quickly replaced by a sneer. What I teach is that actions have consequences, and the consequence of looking like a bum is not being welcome in my restaurant. The elderly man, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, spoke up softly. I'm sorry for causing trouble, I'll go. Steph turned to him, his expression softening. No, sir. You have every right to be here. You paid for a meal, and you should be able to enjoy it in peace. The manager's face twisted in disgust. Fine, you want to eat with this trash? Be my guest, but you can all do it outside. With that, he roughly grabbed the old man's arm, steering him towards the exit. Steph moved to intervene, but the manager's next words stopped him cold. Touch me and I'll call the cops. I'm sure they'd love to hear how a homeless man is causing trouble in my restaurant. The threat hung in the air, a stark reminder of the power imbalance at play. Steph's mind raced, weighing his options. He could escalate the situation, potentially causing a scene that would undoubtedly make headlines, or he could find another way to address this injustice. As they were herded towards the exit, Riley's small voice piped up once more. Dad, this isn't right. We have to do something. Steph squeezed her hand, his resolve strengthening. You're right, sweetheart, and we will. But sometimes the best way to fight injustice isn't head-on. We need to be smart about this. As the manager returned inside, he made a show of wiping his hands on his apron after handling the homeless man. His muttered comments about them all smelling like trash carried clearly enough to be heard, intended as a final insult. Steph stood there, anger and disbelief warring within him. The situation had escalated far beyond what he could have imagined when they first pulled into the drive-thru. Outside in the parking lot, Steph and Riley helped settle the elderly man on a bench near where a towing truck was escorting the broken car that had earlier blocked the drive-thru. The man's leg showed visible injuries from the manager's rough handling, the damage clear even in the fading afternoon light. Steph knelt beside the bench, examining the wounds with growing concern. His jaw tightened as he saw the extent of the bruising, anger at the situation evident in his expression. Sir, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Steph said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. May I ask your name? The old man looked up, a mix of pain and gratitude in his eyes. Frank Thompson. Riley, standing nearby, piped up. Mr. Frank, we're going to help you, right, Dad? Steph nodded, a determined look crossing his face. Absolutely. This kind of treatment is unacceptable. As Steph considered their next move, Riley's face lit up with an idea. Dad, why don't you do a live stream on Instagram? You could show everyone what happened. Steph's eyes widened at the suggestion, immediately recognizing its potential. It was a way to shine a light on this injustice without escalating the situation further. That's brilliant, Riley, Steph said, giving his daughter a proud smile. He turned to Frank, explaining gently, Mr. Thompson, would you be comfortable if I recorded what happened and shared it online? It might help prevent this from happening to others. Frank looked confused for a moment, so Riley jumped in to help. It's like being on TV, but not real TV. People watch from their phones. Understanding dawned on Frank's face, and he nodded slowly. If you think it'll help, son, go right ahead. I'd like to be on TV. He smiled for the first time. Steph pulled out his phone, quickly setting up the live stream. As he did, Riley helped Frank feel more at ease, chatting with him about his favorite foods and asking about his life. You are a bright child, Riley, I can see that, Frank said. Your father must be proud of you. Before starting the stream, Steph took a deep breath, centering himself. This wasn't about him or his celebrity status. It was about standing up for what was right and giving a voice to those who often went unheard. With everything in place, Steph pressed the button to go live. As viewers began to join the stream, he introduced himself and briefly explained the situation. Hey everyone, he began, his voice calm and measured. I'm here with my family and a new friend named Frank. We've just experienced something that I think is important to share. It's about how we treat each other, especially those who might be going through tough times. As Steph spoke, he panned the camera to show Frank, who offered a tentative smile. Riley, ever the social butterfly, waved enthusiastically at the camera, "Mr. Frank," Steph said gently, "would you like to introduce yourself and maybe share a bit about your day?" Frank nodded, clearing his throat. "Hello," he began, his voice slightly shaky but gaining strength as he spoke. "My name is Frank Thompson. I'm currently homeless, and today I experienced both great kindness and terrible cruelty, all within the span of an hour." As Frank began to recount the events of the day, from the initial act of kindness in the drive-thru to the confrontation in the restaurant, Steph watched the viewer count climb rapidly. Comments flooded in, a mix of shock, sympathy, and calls for action. "What happened here today is not okay," Steph added, his voice calm but firm. "No one should be treated this way, regardless of their circumstances. We're going to make this right." Steph knew that this live stream was just the beginning. The story they were sharing had the potential to spark a larger conversation about homelessness, dignity, and how society treats its most vulnerable members. As Frank continued to speak, his words touching hearts across the digital landscape, Steph felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today, they weren't just standing up for one man, they were giving voice to countless others who had faced similar discrimination. As Frank finished recounting the events of the day, Steph's livestream gained viewers by the second. Suddenly, Riley's order number lit up on the digital display board. "Looks like our order is ready," Steph said to the camera. "We're going to head inside to pick it up. Stay with us." Steph, Riley, and Frank re-entered the McDonald's to collect their order from the pickup counter. The camera captured the brightly lit interior, now quieter as customers had left after the recent commotion. The drive-thru had been reopened, bringing a sense of normalcy back to the restaurant. As they approached the counter, Steph kept the live stream going, explaining to the viewers, "We're just here to pick up our food. Everything should be straightforward." However, as they reached for their order, the manager reappeared. His face reddened at the sight of the phone camera, and he immediately began scolding them. "You've been warned not to bring the homeless man in," the manager said, his voice sharp and angry. "I told you he's not welcome here." Steph remained calm, addressing both the manager and the camera. "We just want to collect our food. We can't leave him alone outside. He's a paying customer, just like anyone else." The manager's anger escalated as he realized he was being recorded. He attempted to shut the camera lens, reaching for Steph's phone. However, the height difference made his efforts futile. "Cameras are forbidden in the store," the manager protested, his voice carrying a note of panic. It was clear he was becoming aware that his actions might have consequences. In a moment of remarkable courage, Riley addressed the manager directly on camera. Her clear, young voice cut through his bluster as she pointed out the difference between policy and cruelty. "I know you have your store policy, sir," Riley said, her voice steady despite the tension, "but there's no policy about you having to be rude and kick people out." The manager's response proved even more damning as he openly declared his violent methods for dealing with homeless customers. "Listen, kid," he sneered, "sometimes you need to treat these people like donkeys. Make them hurt and bleed. It's the only way to keep them out, otherwise they won't listen." Steph's eyes widened at this admission, knowing the livestream was capturing every word. He continued documenting the situation and speaking to his growing online audience, explaining the events that had transpired. "Did you hear that, everyone?" Steph said into the camera, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is how this manager treats vulnerable members of our community." Steph continued addressing his online audience, which had now swelled to tens of thousands. "This isn't just about one incident or one person. It's about how we treat each other as human beings. It's about standing up against discrimination and violence, no matter who the victim is." As the confrontation unfolded, fans began recognizing Steph and arriving at the location. The manager's attention split between handling the growing crowd and attempting to control the situation, his previous bravado wavering, as he realized who exactly he'd been confronting. The live stream had turned what could have been an isolated incident of discrimination into a public spectacle, shining a light on the treatment of vulnerable individuals in their community. As the number of viewers continued to climb, it was clear that this confrontation would have far-reaching consequences beyond just this one McDonald's location. As he spoke, Steph noticed Frank wincing in pain. He realized they needed to wrap this up and get the elderly man some proper medical attention. "We're going to end this live stream now," Steph announced. "But this isn't over. We'll be following up to ensure that proper action is taken and that policies are put in place to prevent this kind of treatment in the future." With that, Steph ended the stream, but not before capturing one last image of the manager's panicked face as he realized the full implications of what had just transpired. As the live stream ended, Steph quickly assessed the situation. The crowd in the parking lot was growing rapidly, with more fans arriving by the minute. He knew they needed to leave before the situation became unmanageable. Turning to Frank, Steph extended a warm invitation. "Mr. Thompson, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Stephen Curry, and this is my daughter, Riley Curry. I'm a basketball player, and we're going to play at the local community sports center near here. Would you like to join us at the basketball game? We can get those injuries looked at properly there." Frank's eyes lit up with a mixture of surprise and excitement. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Curry, but are you sure? I wouldn't want to be a bother." Riley chimed in enthusiastically. "Please come, Mr. Frank, it'll be fun." With Frank's grateful acceptance and warm smile, they began making their way towards the Tesla. However, their path was soon blocked by a group of eager fans. About a dozen or more people clamoring for autographs and photos. Steph handled the situation with practiced grace, quickly signing a few hats and taking select pictures, while explaining his need to tend to Frank's injuries. "I really appreciate your support," he said to the gathered fans, "but we have a medical situation here that needs attention. I would really appreciate it if you would allow us to handle this privately so we can attend to Mr. Thompson's wounds quickly before they get infected." The fans, sensing the gravity of the situation, respectfully stepped back, allowing Steph, Riley, and Frank to make their way to the car. As they approached the Tesla, Frank's eyes widened at the sight of the vehicle. The car's distinctive falcon wing doors opened upward, drawing amazed looks from the elderly man. "This is quite a chariot you've got here," Frank remarked, a hint of awe in his voice. Riley giggled, helping Frank into the back seat. "It's cool, right? Wait till you see it drive." As they settled into the car, Aisha's surprise at seeing Frank reflected her isolation from the recent events. While Riley excitedly recounted the confrontation to her mother, Steph retrieved a first aid kit from the trunk. With gentle hands, Steph carefully cleaned and bandaged Frank's wounds. "These look mostly superficial," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Mostly bruises and scratches. We'll apply some cold compresses once we get to the sports center." Frank watched Steph work, a look of wonder on his weathered face. "You're awful good at this for a basketball player," he remarked. Steph chuckled. "Years of dealing with sports injuries, you pick up a thing or two." As he finished up the first aid, Steph couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. What had started as a simple family outing had turned into something much more significant. He knew that the story was far from over, but for now his priority was ensuring Frank's comfort and safety. With everyone settled in the car, Steph took a deep breath before starting the engine. The evening ahead promised to be unlike any game night he had experienced before. As Steph eased the Tesla out of the McDonald's parking lot, the setting sun painted the Oakland sky in hues of orange and purple. The day's events weighed heavily on everyone's minds, creating a thoughtful atmosphere in the car. The smooth hum of the electric engine provided a soothing backdrop to their journey. Steph glanced at the dashboard clock, realizing they were running late for the community game. With one hand on the wheel, he reached for his phone, intending to call his team. Aisha, noticing his movement, gently took the phone from him. "I'll make the call," she said softly. "You focus on driving." As Aisha spoke quietly into the phone, explaining their delay, Steph's eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror. In the back seat, Riley had already started on her nuggets, while Frank tentatively nibbled on his cold fries, the meal he had purchased himself earlier. "Go ahead and eat, Mr. Thompson," Steph encouraged, his voice warm. "I know it's not the best when it's cold, but it'll do you good to have something in your stomach." Frank nodded gratefully, taking a larger bite of his burger. The car fell into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft sounds of eating and the occasional direction from the GPS. As they drove through the familiar streets of Oakland, now bathed in the golden light of early evening, Steph found his mind wandering. The events of the day played over in his head, the initial act of kindness at the drive-thru, the confrontation in the restaurant, the live stream that had unexpectedly gone viral. Aisha finished the call and turned to Steph. "They understand we're running late," she said, "and the live stream has already spread all over social media. People are talking about what happened." Steph nodded, processing this information. He hadn't set out to create a social media storm, but perhaps this was an opportunity to spark a larger conversation about compassion and dignity for all members of their community. As they stopped at a red light, Riley's voice piped up from the back seat. "Mr. Frank, have you always lived in Oakland?" Frank smiled at the young girl's curiosity. "No, not always," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years. "I moved here for work. Oh, must be 30 years ago now." The light turned green, and as Steph eased the car forward, Frank continued his story. He spoke of his early days as a carpenter, the joy he found in creating with his hands. His voice grew wistful as he described meeting his wife, building a life together. "We had some good years," Frank said, his eyes distant with memory. "But life has a way of throwing curveballs at you." As Frank shared more of his story, the loss of his job to automation, his wife's illness, the mounting medical bills, the car fell into a respectful silence. Even Riley, usually bubbling with energy, listened intently, her young face serious as she absorbed the weight of Frank's experiences. Steph found himself sharing bits of his own family's history, the early struggles before his father's NBA career took off, the lessons learned about perseverance and community support. Though their experiences differed vastly in scale, there was a common thread of resilience that resonated with everyone in the car. As they neared the sports center, the conversation lulled. Steph's mind was already working, formulating plans to help Frank beyond just this one evening. He knew he had the resources to make a real difference, and the determination to see it through. The Tesla pulled into the parking lot of the sports center, the familiar building a welcome sight after the tumultuous afternoon. As Steph shut off the engine, he turned to face Frank. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve, "I want you to know that this isn't the end. We're going to help you get back on your feet. Someone with your strength and kindness deserves a fair chance." Frank's eyes welled with tears, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. I don't know what to say," he murmured. Riley reached out, placing her small hand on Frank's arm. "You don't have to say anything, Mr. Frank. That's what friends are for." The sports center hummed with activity as Steph, his family, and Frank made their way inside. The familiar sounds of squeaking sneakers on polished wood and the rhythmic bounce of basketballs filled the air. As they entered, heads turned, curious glances following their progress. Steph approached a staff member, his voice low but urgent. "Can we get some cold compresses for Mr. Thompson? He has some injuries that need attention." The staff member nodded, quickly disappearing to fetch the supplies. Steph guided Frank to a comfortable seat near the court, ensuring he had a good view of the upcoming game. "I need to go change," Steph explained, "but Riley will stay with you. We'll get those bruises looked at properly in just a few minutes." As Steph headed to the locker room, he could hear Riley's animated voice introducing Frank to some of the other players' families. Her natural charm and enthusiasm seemed to break down any initial awkwardness, and soon Frank was engaged in conversation with a small group of interested listeners. In the locker room, Steph found himself moving through his pre-game routine on autopilot. As he laced up his shoes, his mind was still processing the events of the day. The familiar actions of stretching and warm-up exercises helped to center him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his worldview. When he emerged from the locker room, Steph's eyes immediately sought out Frank in the crowd. He found him still seated where he'd left him, now with a cold compress pressed gently against his bruised leg. Riley sat beside him, chattering away, while Frank nodded and smiled, clearly enjoying the girl's company. As the game began, Steph found himself playing with a renewed sense of purpose. Each time he glanced toward the stands, he saw Frank's eyes following the action with genuine interest. During a break in play, Steph overheard Frank explaining some of the finer points of the game to Riley. "See how they're setting up that screen," Frank was saying, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "That's to give the shooter some space." Riley nodded, absorbing every word. "Wow, Mr. Frank, you really know a lot about basketball." Frank chuckled, a hint of his younger self shining through. "Used to play a bit in my day. Nothing like your dad's level, of course, but I loved the game." As the evening progressed, Steph found himself hyper-aware of Frank's presence. It wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about the unexpected connection they'd formed, the reminder of how a small act of kindness could snowball into something much larger. After the final buzzer, as fans began to file out of the center, Steph gathered his family and Frank. The air was thick with unspoken emotion as they stood together, the empty court stretching out behind them. "I've been thinking," Steph began, his voice serious but warm. "Mr. Thompson, we'd like to help you get back on your feet. Not just for tonight, but for good." Frank's eyes widened, a mix of hope and disbelief crossing his face. "You've already done so much," he protested weakly. Aisha stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. "We have the means to help, and we want to. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life." Riley, picking up on the gravity of the moment, added her own heartfelt plea. "Please let us help, Mr. Frank. You're our friend now, and we cannot just leave you back at the street." Steph smiled warmly as he looked at the older man. "We have an apartment nearby, actually," he began. "If you'd like, you can stay there for now, just until we can help you find something more permanent. My assistant will help with the arrangements and make sure everything's taken care of." The older man looked up at him, a mix of disbelief and gratitude in his eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want to trouble your family," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Steph shook his head, his smile never fading. "You're not troubling us, Mr. Frank. You deserve to be taken care of, and we can help you get settled in while we figure out something better. Don't worry about a thing." "Thank you," the man whispered, his eyes brimming with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." Steph placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's the least we can do. My assistant will be in touch soon. We'll get everything squared away." Overwhelmed by emotion, Frank could only nod, tears glistening in his eyes. As they left the sports center, the cool night air a refreshing change from the warm interior, Steph felt a deep sense of purpose settling over him. They had faced injustice and responded with compassion. They had turned a moment of cruelty into an opportunity for lasting change. The stars twinkled overhead as they walked to the car, a reminder of the vast possibilities that lay before them. There would be challenges ahead, Steph knew, but together they would face them. For in this moment, under the Oakland sky, a new chapter was beginning, not just for Frank, but for all of them.